The room goes quiet the second the child stands up. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to pull the breath out of the air and make every fork pause halfway to a mouth. In places like this, silence means something has gone wrong. Crystal glasses catch the chandelier light like small stars. Linen tablecloths sit heavy and perfect, ironed flat, untouched by real life. This restaurant was built for people who don't check prices, who don't count days, who don't worry about tomorrow because tomorrow has always belonged to them. And at the center of it all sits the CEO. Alone. Tailored suit pressed sharp. Watch worth more than most cars. Phone buzzing with unread messages he refuses to open. His food has gone cold, but he hasn't noticed. He noticed the family, though. Earlier. The moment they walked in. They didn't belong here. Everyone could see that. A black mother holding her purse too close. A father wearing shoes that had known too many sidewalks. A child with eyes too big for his face, taking in the room like it was a museum where touching anything might trigger an alarm. They stood frozen near the entrance, waiting for permission no one was planning to give. The CEO had watched from his table. Watched the hesitation. The way the host's smile tightened just a little. The way nearby diners glanced, then looked away fast, as if poverty were contagious. Something uncomfortable had twisted in his chest. Not compassion. Not yet. Just annoyance. Guilt. The kind that shows up uninvited and demands to be fed. So he paid. A quick word to the server. A nod. A credit card slid across the table without a second thought. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was pocket change. A gesture small enough to keep his conscience quiet for the night. A kindness meant to disappear as soon as the plates were cleared. The family had thanked him too many times. The mother's voice shook when she spoke. The father nodded without meeting his eyes. The child just stared, curious, careful, like he was studying a stranger in a storybook. The CEO had waved it off, already turning back to his phone, already done with the moment. Now they were eating. Slowly. Carefully. As if the food might be taken away if they moved too fast. The staff kept watching. Not openly. Not rudely. But they watched. Tight smiles. Quick glances. The kind that count bites and minutes. Other diners did the same. Pretending not to stare while staring anyway. Measuring how long generosity was allowed to last before it became an inconvenience. The parents felt it. You could see it in their shoulders, pulled inward. Hands folded in their laps between bites. Apologies already forming behind their teeth in case someone decided they'd overstayed their welcome. This wasn't their world. They knew it. Everyone knew it. And then the child stood up. His chair scraped softly against the floor. Not enough to make noise. Just enough to be noticed. The mother reached for him right away, panic flashing across her face. Sit down. Don't draw attention. Don't give them a reason. The father's jaw tightened. Eyes forward. He had learned long ago that stillness could be a shield. But the child stepped away before either of them could stop him. He didn't rush. Didn't run. He walked with the careful confidence of someone who has learned how to take up as little space as possible. His shoes were scuffed. His shirt a size too big. His hands were small, fingers curled tight like he was holding on to courage he couldn't afford to lose. The CEO felt it before he saw it. That shift. That subtle pull. He looked up just as the child reached his table. Up close, the boy smelled like soap and street air. Clean, but tired. His eyes were dark and steady, not scared, not hopeful either. Just serious. Like someone who had already learned the world didn't owe him anything. The restaurant held its breath. The child didn't ask for money. Didn't say thank you. Didn't smile. He reached out and placed something gently beside the CEO's plate. Not tossed. Not slid. Placed. Then he straightened, nodded once, and turned away. The CEO looked down. At first, it looked like a napkin. Folded small. Ordinary. The kind of thing people leave behind all the time. Trash, really. His first instinct was irritation. A flash of it. He had paid. Wasn't that enough? Then he noticed the weight. Napkins don't sit like that. They don't press into the table with quiet intention. He unfolded it slowly. The room blurred. It wasn't paper inside. It wasn't a note. It wasn't a plea. It was a hospital bracelet. Yellowed. Worn. The plastic cracked from age. His name printed in faded ink. His birthday. A number he hadn't seen in decades. From a free clinic downtown. From a time before the suits. Before the boardrooms. Before the money. Before he had learned how to survive by becoming someone else. His chest tightened. Hard. Like a fist closing around his lungs. Sound dropped away. The clink of glasses. The low music. The murmurs. Gone. He was 12 again. Sitting on a vinyl chair with his feet not quite touching the floor. Hungry. Ashamed. Listening to nurses talk around him like he wasn't there. Promising himself that one day, he would never feel this small again. Never feel invisible. Never need anyone. He had kept that promise. Or at least, he thought he had. The CEO swallowed, but it didn't help. His eyes burned. He hadn't cried in years. He didn't allow himself to. Not in offices. Not at funerals. Certainly not in restaurants like this. He looked up. The child was already walking back to his table. Calm. Quiet. Like his part was done. The parents were watching him now, fear all over their faces. The mother's lips moved, whispering his name. The father's hand hovered, unsure whether to pull him back or let him finish whatever this was. The CEO sat frozen. Around him, people started to notice. Real notice this time. Heads turning. Eyes narrowing. A manager took a step forward, sensing disruption, sensing risk. Kindness was fine. But emotion. Emotion made people uncomfortable. The CEO closed his hand around the bracelet. In that moment, he understood something that made his stomach drop. This dinner had never been about generosity. Not really. It wasn't about easing hunger or easing guilt. It was about being seen. And for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. The restaurant hums with quiet murmurs, but the tension doesn't fade. It thickens, heavy and slow, like smoke curling through a closed room. The polished floors, the soft clink of silverware, the murmur of polite conversation, all of it seems distant now. The child sits back down after leaving the small object on the CEO's table, but the energy in the air has changed. It's heavier. Charged. The kind of tension that makes even the servers pause mid-step, tray balanced in trembling hands. The staff exchange glances, smiles tight, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the way. Something is happening here, and it isn't part of the script they've rehearsed 1,000 times. Whispers ripple through the dining room. Quiet at first, careful, the kind that trails off when it reaches ears too attuned to judgment. Is that? Someone murmurs. Another voice whispers behind a napkin, do they really belong here? The comments aren't loud, but they're there, cutting across the soft music like tiny knives. The family feels them immediately. The mother presses her palms together, shoulders stiff, eyes darting around the room. The father's jaw tightens. He sits straight, though his fingers tremble slightly against the table. The child's small frame doesn't move, doesn't flinch. But his eyes track everything. Every glance. Every whisper. Every whispering judgment aimed like a silent accusation. The manager approaches, stepping lightly, polite but sharp in tone. Sir, we usually don't allow, his words trail off, unfinished, leaving the implication in the air. He doesn't need to finish. Everyone knows what he means. The family hears it anyway, the weight of the unspoken judgment pressing against their chests. They're here by grace, not right. They're visible, too visible, and the room itself seems to lean on that fact, ready to correct it with rules and quiet threats. The CEO doesn't respond. He doesn't speak. He is still staring at what the child left behind. His fingers twitch slightly, brushing the edge of the object, unsure if he should touch it or leave it alone. The restaurant feels small suddenly, walls closing in as if the polished surfaces themselves are judging him for noticing them, for allowing them to exist in his space, in his world. The mother notices the manager's movement first. She rises slowly, voice trembling, words spilling over each other in an attempt to preempt blame. "We're grateful, sir. We didn't mean to cause trouble." Her apology is layered in politeness, wrapped in dignity and years of survival. She has practiced this posture in countless places where she wasn't welcome, in offices and stores, in classrooms and streets where eyes measured her worth and found it lacking. Her dignity is survival-trained. Every apology is a shield. The father remains seated, hands folded, eyes glued to the floor, jaw clenched as though enduring punishment is his default state. Humiliation sits on him like a second skin he can't peel away. The child sits quietly, observing. His body doesn't react, but his presence fills the space more than any words could. It is an assertion of humanity, a silent refusal to shrink entirely, even in a room that expects invisibility. The child knows how much can be tolerated. He has learned the weight of being seen too early, too plainly. He understands how quickly kindness becomes discomfort when it challenges someone's sense of power. The manager steps closer, voice firm now. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is not a space for..." His words, sharp and final, hang in the air. Kindness has limits, especially when it inconveniences those who wield power. The family flinches. The mother grips her chair for support. The father's eyes flick to hers, a silent exchange of fear and resignation. The child watches them, but he doesn't move. Then, softly, clearly, with a voice that carries more weight than the manager anticipated, the child speaks. "We were almost finished." Almost. The word hits the CEO harder than any sharp reprimand, harder than the manager's implied threat. Almost finished eating. Almost allowed to exist without apology. Almost human here. Almost treated like the kind of person who deserves space at a table, respect, recognition. His chest tightens. The word vibrates through him, stirring a long-buried memory of his own youth, of moments when the world whispered that he didn't belong, that he was supposed to be small and invisible, that he was not worth noticing. He finally looks up. Really looks. For the first time since the evening began, he sees them, not as a distant moment of charity, not as bodies occupying space he owns, but as people. People who exist in full, despite the discomfort of those around them. The mother's trembling strength. The father's controlled restraint. The child's quiet defiance. The invisible burdens they carry. The silences they must obey. He sees the way injustice doesn't roar, it whispers, soft and deadly, expecting compliance, expecting acquiescence. The memory rises in him unbidden. Boardrooms. Meetings. Power plays. How silence has been used against him. How it can crush more than words ever could. How the people who wield power often do so by teaching others to stay small, stay silent, stay unseen. And now, confronted with someone else's quiet suffering, he feels the weight of witnessing, the heaviness of responsibility pressing on his chest. He hesitates. Because stepping in, correcting this moment, exposing injustice, doing the right thing, means vulnerability. It means being seen in a way he has avoided his entire life. And the thing on the table, the small, impossible token the child left, has already cracked something open inside him. Something that used to be closed tight, something that believed control meant safety, something that thought noticing others was optional. The tension grows heavier with each second. The manager's voice rises again, this time more insistent, the room's whispers swelling with expectation. Other diners shift in their chairs, sensing that rules are bending, sensing that social order is teetering. And yet the child sits still. Silent. Waiting. Patiently. Not afraid. Not pleading. Waiting. A single phrase hanging in the air like a promise. "We were almost finished." The CEO's fingers tighten around the edge of the napkin, the folded object. He exhales slowly. He can feel the history in it, the weight of hunger and neglect and survival, the echoes of every place he ever sat unseen. He can feel the family's fear, the child's courage, the mother's trembling dignity. He can feel the room leaning in, judging him for noticing them, for acknowledging them as more than objects of discomfort. And he knows he has to act. Not yet speaking. Not yet moving. But his gaze holds the room in place. His presence shifts the balance in subtle ways, the kind that are felt rather than seen. The injustice is still there, thick as smoke, but now it is being confronted silently. Each heartbeat draws the gap between expectation and courage tighter, until it becomes unbearable not to respond. The manager hesitates. The family waits. The child watches. And the CEO breathes in, finally understanding the full weight of being seen. It is more than recognition. It is survival. It is resistance. It is the right to exist without apology. And it is a challenge to every person in the room who believed they controlled the story. Time stretches. Forks hover in midair. Glasses catch light like stars, then dim as the energy shifts. The CEO's hand rests on the table, not touching the family, but reaching in a way that speaks louder than words. The room holds its collective breath. Every silent gaze, every whispered doubt, every unspoken judgment waits for his next move. And the child, calm as ever, waits too. Because he knows power is fragile. He knows courage is visible even in stillness. He knows what almost means, and he knows that almost should never be the measure of someone's right to be seen. The restaurant has become a stage for something larger than itself. A test. A reckoning. A mirror held up to those who sit comfortably behind privilege, forcing them to confront what they ignore every day. And the CEO realizes, with a sudden painful clarity, that this moment is not about the dinner. It is not about guilt or charity. It is about recognition. About justice in its smallest, most human form. About the responsibility of noticing when others are made to feel small. The manager exhales sharply. The whispers continue, soft but relentless. The family feels the tension press heavier, but the child remains still, eyes steady, waiting for the adult in the room to decide what kind of person he will be. The CEO inhales again, bracing himself for the choice. And the room, silent now in anticipation, waits with him, every polished surface and judgmental glance holding space for what comes next. Because in that restaurant, at that table, under the watchful eyes of strangers, something profound is about to be tested. Whether power will crush or protect, whether silence will oppress or give way, and whether dignity, quiet, unshakable dignity, can finally be recognized and respected.
The CEO's fingers hover over the folded napkin, hesitant, almost afraid to touch it. The restaurant hums quietly around him, but it feels distant, as if he's underwater. The murmurs of other diners, the clinking of cutlery, the shuffle of waiters, all of it fades into a soft, irrelevant blur. He lifts the napkin slowly, deliberately, as if unwrapping a secret he's not sure he's ready to see. The crease of the paper folds back, and inside, taped carefully, is something small, worn, personal, a hospital bracelet, yellowed at the edges, faded from decades of time, but unmistakable. His name printed on it, his birthday, the numbers that tie him to a past he rarely remembers. From a shelter clinic, long gone. From a time no one alive now would think to recall. He freezes. The bracelet sits in his palm, like a small, fragile revelation. His chest tightens, breath catching in his throat. It's impossible, absurd, and yet undeniable. The room feels suspended, the air heavy, taut with expectation. He remembers the cold linoleum floors of the shelter. The unkind nurses who didn't mean to be cruel but were too busy to care. The nights curled under threadbare blankets, stomach grumbling, silent, invisible. He had promised himself long ago he would never be that small again, that he would climb, succeed, vanish from the streets of his youth. And now, decades later, that very past has walked back into his life through a child who should not have had the power to reach him at all. He looks up, really looks, not at the napkin, not at the bracelet, but at the child. And for the first time, he sees him, sees past the thin shirt, the scuffed shoes, the wary eyes that scan every corner for threats, sees the quiet strength, the dignity that refuses to bow, the resilience that has been forged in struggle. And then he sees the resemblance, the look in the child's eyes. The same look he once had when the world told him he didn't belong anywhere. The defiance tempered by caution, the courage wrapped in silence. Recognition strikes him like a blow. You found this? Where? He asks, voice tight, controlled, betraying more than he intends. The child shrugs. A small, measured motion, as though revealing too much would be dangerous. My mom keeps lost things, he says softly. She says people leave pieces of themselves behind when they're hurting. Words hang in the air, heavy, resonant, unmovable. Silence crashes into the room like a wave breaking over a cliff. It's the kind of silence that makes a man conscious of every heartbeat, every breath, every movement that has carried him to this exact point. Waiters pause mid-step. Diners glance over his shoulders, sensing the sudden gravity, though they do not understand its depth. The manager, standing rigid, shifts uneasily. feeling that the rules he thought were absolute are now bending, warping, breaking. The CEO rises from his chair, not in anger, not in confrontation, but in recognition. Every muscle in his body moves. With purpose, he turns to the manager, voice calm, unshakable, carrying authority that no one dares challenge. "They're staying," he says. "And so am I." The words slice through the air. No argument, no compromise, no retreat. The power in the room shifts subtly, irreversibly. The manager, once confident, takes a step back. The stares of other diners transform, just a fraction. Respect replacing discomfort. Though it arrives too late to be noble, the CEO kneels to the child's level, letting himself meet his gaze, fully, openly. His hands hover over the bracelet for a moment, then settle. Gently in front of him, palms up, offering acknowledgement rather than control. "That bracelet saved my life. Once," he admits, voice low, steady, tinged with vulnerability he rarely allows himself. "I didn't know it could come back." The child nods, eyes calm, measuring, carrying the wisdom of experience beyond his years. "Things find their way home," he says. No more explanation is needed. The room holds its breath as if those words have shifted the entire air, altered the laws of consequence and expectation. The CEO allows himself a small exhale, a release he didn't realize he had been holding. Wealth, power, privilege, none of it matters now. It has never mattered. The parents, seated, watch the exchange, unsure whether to move, speak, or stay silent. Relief flits across the mother's face, tempered by the habitual caution that comes from surviving a world that rarely notices. The father straightens slightly, jaw unclenching in small increments, allowing for a fragile hope to settle in his chest. The child's presence, still calm, still composed, anchors the moment. He has already known the power of recognition, the weight of being truly seen, and now he has shared it without demanding gratitude. Without asking for more than acknowledgement, the CEO feels it fully now. The fragility of power, the absolute weight of dignity. Every decision, every boardroom, every carefully measured step in his life had led him here, to this moment of confrontation with a truth he cannot avoid. He can feel the years of accumulated authority, of walls built around his emotions, of control wielded as armor, starting to melt. The bracelet in his hand, the child before him. The family seated cautiously. They are mirrors, reflecting the man he once was, the man he nearly became, and the man he has a chance to be now. He sits back slightly, letting the bracelet rest in his hands, examining its scratches, its worn edges, the faded letters of his name. Each mark tells a story, each crease a memory. Hunger, neglect, loneliness, fear, survival, hope. Each story, once ignored, once hidden, now confronts him with its quiet insistence. Remember, recognize, respect. Dignity is not a gift to be given lightly, it is a right to be honored. The child shifts, small hands folded on the table, waiting, patient, still. He doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't demand change. He simply exists, fully and unapologetically, and in doing so, teaches a lesson more powerful than any lecture, more lasting than any wealth. He teaches that recognition is a currency the world too often refuses to acknowledge, and that when it is offered sincerely, it transforms everyone involved. The CEO breathes deeply, finally letting himself feel the enormity of the moment. He looks to the parents, whose careful politeness has masked strength for years. He allows himself to acknowledge the weight they carry every day just to exist. The mother's eyes meet his briefly, and he sees her fear, her courage, her exhaustion. The father's stance softens imperceptibly, the tension in his shoulders easing as recognition and respect replace the habitual restraint. He stands fully now, chair scraping softly against the floor, a sound that seems louder than it should be. In the hush of the room, he looks around, surveying the space that had once seemed hostile, alien, controlled by rules that left no room for humanity. Now, it feels small, constrained, not because the restaurant has changed, but because he has changed. The rules are no longer absolute. Power has shifted quietly but irrevocably. And in that quiet shift, Elise on America, wealth is fleeting. Authority is fragile. Influence can open doors or close them, but neither can replace the basic humanity that binds us all. The bracelet, once lost, has returned, not as a relic, but as a mirror. It reflects what matters most: dignity, recognition, respect. The CEO knows now that these things cannot be bought. They cannot be commanded. They must be earned, acknowledged, and protected. The child leans back, eyes meeting the CEO's one last time. No smile, no flourish, just a quiet certainty. Things find their way home, he repeats softly. A mantra, a truth, a gift. And for the first time in a long while, The CEO feels whole not because of his money, his influence, or his title, but because he has been reminded of what truly matters. Because he has witnessed the courage of someone who should have been invisible and chosen to honor it. Around them, the restaurant begins to stir again. Conversations resume, forks, scrape plates, chairs shift, but the energy is changed, subtly but permanently. Eyes that once looked with judgment now look with something closer to respect, though it will take them time to understand why. The manager steps back, letting the family stay, knowing this is no longer a situation he can control. And in the stillness that follows, the CEO kneels once more to the child's level, brushing a thumb lightly over the bracelet, anchoring the moment in memory. Wealth means nothing here. Authority means nothing. The only measure is the quiet strength of dignity in the CEO, finally fully present, finally fully human in this small, tense, miraculous space. Understands that recognition and respect are not gestures, they are lifelines, fragile and essential, and that sometimes the smallest hand can return the greatest lesson, the kind that stays long after the meal is over, long after the room empties, long after the world has gone on as it always does. In that moment, wealth, power, and status are shadows. Dignity is light, and the CEO feels it shining through the bracelet. The child, the family, the quiet, unyielding brilliance of being seen. The lesson is clear, and it will not be forgotten. Recognition is life. Respect is sacred. And when someone extends it without asking for gratitude, it transforms the world, even if only in one small corner, at one humble table, on one quiet night. Because sometimes, the thing on the table isn't just an object, it is a reckoning, and it finds its way home. The dinner lingers, slow and deliberate, as if time itself has bent to witness what is unfolding. Plates sit half empty, the food cooling but untouched. Because tonight, the meal is no longer about hunger. It is about acknowledgement, presence, and the quiet exchange of something far heavier than currency. The CEO leans back in his chair, shoulders tight, with a tension that has finally begun to release. Listening. Not offering advice, not making plans, not deciding outcomes, just listening. The mother speaks first, her voice steady but soft, each word carefully chosen. She tells her story not to impress, not to plead, not to demand pity. She speaks so that she can be known, so that her life, her struggles, and her dignity are recognized. Her eyes never seek validation, yet every glance carries the weight of survival and the strength it takes to survive unseen. The father adds pieces. Brief and measured. His words are economical, precise, but layered with the depth of years spent protecting, shielding, and hiding. He does not seek thanks. He does not ask for anything more than acknowledgement. He describes nights spent on cold floors, meals skipped, so his children could eat, the constant vigilance required to survive a world that overlooks them. Each sentence lands in the CEO's mind like a stone in still water, rippling outwards, touching parts of himself he had long buried. The boy he once was, the hunger he once knew, the quiet shame he once carried. The child at the table eats slowly, watching silently, absorbing the man across from him, the CEO, who, for the first time, seems to remember not just what he has become, but where he came from. There is no fear in the child's gaze, only a measured calm, an understanding that the man is learning, truly learning. The weight of the past and the cost of ignoring it. As the meal winds down, there is no rush to leave. The CEO allows the silence to stretch, letting each pause speak volumes. The clink of forks and the scrape of chairs are secondary to the gravity in the air. He watches the family, seeing their dignity, their patience, the strength they carry just to be present. And he understands now that this is not about charity. It never was. It is about justice, delayed but finally delivered. The parents rise to leave, but there is no hint of pity in their posture. Their shoulders are straight, their heads held high. They leave not with shame, but with plans for housing that ensures safety, for education that opens doors, for opportunities that had been denied far too long. It is not a gift offered out of generosity. It is a recognition of worth that has always existed, now returned in action. Weeks pass, and the CEO finds himself back in the same restaurant, at the same table. At first glance, nothing appears different. The chairs, the polished surfaces, the soft murmur of other diners, it all seems familiar, but everything has changed. He reaches into his pocket and feels the bracelet, still warm from the evening. He received it, still holding the weight of memory. It is no longer an object of nostalgia. It is not a token of wealth or success. It is a reminder of survival, of the boy he once was, of the families who live in the margins, often unseen, often disregarded. It rests there, a quiet pulse against his palm, anchoring him to the truth he had forgotten. Power does not reveal character. It tests it. It does not announce morality. It demands it, often in the smallest moments, in the most unexpected ways. He looks around the room, watching diners who are busy with conversations, phones, and fleeting distractions. He notices the waiter who had served them weeks ago, the manager whose authority had seemed absolute, the subtle hierarchies and codes that dictate behavior. But now he sees the room differently. He sees how easily power can shield ignorance and how quickly silence can suppress recognition. He understands, profoundly, that the greatest measure of a life is not what one accumulates at the table, money, accolades, titles, but what one leaves behind for those who remain outside. Those still waiting for acknowledgement, for dignity, for the recognition that they, too, exist. He remembers the child's small hands, steady, deliberate, holding out something he could not yet understand at the time. Those hands had taught him a lesson that no boardroom, no lecture, no accumulation of wealth could ever have delivered. The smallest hands returned the largest truth, that true power is measured not by what is taken, but by what is given in acknowledgement of humanity. The CEO feels a weight lifting from his shoulders, replaced by a calm that comes only from understanding and action aligned with moral clarity. It is quiet but absolute, a revelation that settles deep in the chest. In the days that follow, he begins to act differently. Decisions at work are measured not by profit alone, but by impact. Opportunities are offered not to gain favor, but to honor potential. Donations and actions, once gestures of guilt, become intentional, structured to ensure dignity and respect. He mentors those overlooked, opens doors that had been shut, and insists on seeing the faces and hearing the stories behind the numbers. It is not grandstanding. It is not for applause. It is a continuation of the lesson delivered by a child who understood, without pretense, the importance of being seen. He thinks often about the family, the mother's calm insistence on being acknowledged, the father's quiet strength, the child's stillness. Each memory reinforces a truth he cannot unlearn. Every life carries weight. Every story deserves recognition, and every act of kindness, intentional or accidental, can ripple further than imagined. Even a small gesture of folded napkin, a quiet acknowledgement, a simple act of seeing can transform lives. It can shift balances, restore dignity, and correct injustices that have persisted unnoticed. The bracelet rests in his pocket as a constant reminder, not of his success, but of the lives touched by attention and respect. Not of what he has, but of what he owes to the unseen, the overlooked, the forgotten. He realizes that the world can be cruel, indifferent, blind, but those who choose to see, to recognize, and to act with conscience, leave a legacy that endures. One cannot measure a life by wealth or status alone. One measures it by the space opened for others to exist fully, freely, and without apology. He recalls the moment. The child left the bracelet, the room silent, the air tense, the weight of history pressing on every shoulder. That one act, small and quiet, has reshaped his understanding of power. It has redefined responsibility. It has shown him that the path to redemption, to moral clarity, is not always found in grand gestures or public accolades, but in intimate, unassuming moments where recognition is offered and received with sincerity. The CEO carries that lesson with him now, embedding it into decisions, into interactions, into the way he moves through the world. And sometimes, late at night, he tucks the bracelet in his pocket, closes his eyes, and recalls the child's gaze. No words are needed. It is a memory of courage, of quiet resistance, of dignity that refused to be diminished. It is a memory that humbles him, guides him, and reminds him that the measure of a life is not the space one occupies, but the space one opens for others. It is a lesson in humanity, in morality, in the delicate art of seeing, truly seeing, another person and allowing them to matter. Because in the end, the greatest power is not the wealth we amass, nor the influence we wield, nor the authority we command. It is the capacity to leave behind a world more just, more humane, more respectful than the one we inherited. And sometimes, the smallest hands return the biggest lessons. Sometimes, a child's quiet courage can awaken a lifetime of understanding. And the most unlikely person, the CEO, understands this now. He carries it with him, not as guilt, not as obligation, but as recognition of what it means to be human, and fully responsible for the impact one leaves behind. The bracelet, the family, the child, they are etched into his consciousness. They are reminders that the true legacy of life is measured not by what is taken, but by what is left behind. The restaurant, the table, the quiet meal becomes sacred in memory. Because power tests memory, as it always does. And the most enduring truth he has learned is that the worth of a life is reflected not in the riches it collects, but in the dignity it restores, and the humanity it honors.